You've had one of the most diverse career arcs I have ever seen. मेडिसिन, forensics, psychology, software. थोड़ा इसके बारे में बताइए.
When we realized that after paying everybody, we'll have just 80 rupees left with us.
Oh wow.
Biggest challenges at that time was finding clients.
Most of the times companies struggle with project है तो resource नहीं है और resource है तो project नहीं है.
2008 to 2012, we were doing really well. I, for no reason, came down with clinical depression.
So today I am in conversation with Dr. Tarique Sani. Dr. Sani's life connects medicine, psychology, and technology in the most unexpected way. Dr. Sani is professor of forensic medicine at Datta Meghe College, a certified CBT therapist, and founder of SaniSoft, a tech company that he nurtured for 2 decades. So चलिए बात करते हैं डॉक्टर सानी से और जानते हैं उनकी स्टोरी. डॉक्टर सानी, वेलकम टू द शो.
Thank you, Piyush, for having me on the show, and I'm very excited to talk to you today.
So let's dive in, Dr. Sani. Like, you've had one of the most diverse career arcs I have ever seen. मेडिसिन, forensics, psychology, software. थोड़ा इसके बारे में बताइए.
Uh, yeah, so like I have been always interested in computers. Like my first computer was a ZX Spectrum, in which I acquired in 1980. That is nearly for
Oh,
45 years ago. So I was like 14 or 15 and I got a ZX Spectrum. And ZX Spectrum, in case your people these days may not know, it is seeing a resurgence. But ZX Spectrum had all of 48 KB of RAM, not MB, kilobytes.
48 KB.
KB,
Kilobytes. Okay.
kilobytes. Like a photo is like 100 times more than that these days. So, but
That's
it
like
came,
ancient kind of.
yeah. So, like out of 48 KB, 16 was ROM, that is read only memory. 16 KB, they managed to bundle in a basic interpreter as well. So right away you could program in BASIC. So that was my first computer. But unfortunately, due to various things, I got into medical as a profession. And it's not that I did not like medical as a profession, but yeah, I got into medicine as a professional education. And I did study to learn pediatrics and then forensic. I started my pediatric practice, and when I started my pediatric practice, I was young, full of ideal things like I will serve the poor, and I did start my practice in Mominpura, which is one of the less developed areas of Nagpur, and my practice was doing okayish. What? It's funny that I used to charge my patients 10 rupees, and in that I would also give them medicine, and money did not really matter because by the time I had passed MBBS, I was already playing the stock market. But unfortunately stock market crashed, and then a source of regular income went away, and to enhance my income, people were suggesting things which are taken as normal these days, and they are clubbed under networking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like admit patients to XYZ, send them for test to ABC. All those things I did not really care about, and I did not want to do that, and that was fine because my wife was earning very well, and we had said that fine, that we will manage with her income, whereas I continued with my medical practice and the ideal of serving people. Unfortunately, when the stock market crashed a few months later, her job was also in jeopardy. And I remember one very hot summer afternoon, I was throughout the day in my clinic. The clinic was very small, like it was a 12 by 12 room, and there was a vegetable vendor across my clinic. And at the end of the day, that vegetable vendor had much more money than what I had in my drawer. And at that time, we were pregnant, and my son was to be born in November. And this is like the summer of that 1997. So I said, okay, fine, it is still okay. But when our son was born, we said, no, this needs to be different. And
This needs to change.
this needs to change. And as you remember, like the following January, internet came to Nagpur. And internet, since I was already into computers, internet coming to Nagpur was just a leap. And we created a community of Nagpurkars. And I was already into programming. We had a mailing list of non-resident Nagpurkars, as we used to call them. And one fine day, somebody said that, will you program a small thing for me? And I was coincidentally already into open source and Linux by that time, because we were also into BBS, bulletin board service, wherein people would dial in. And I had gotten in touch with people from PC Quest. PC Quest was a print magazine at that time, and we were writing articles for PC Quest. So that's how SaniSoft started, from one computer in the corner of my bedroom, out of need. And of course, I did not quit medical practice one fine day. I used to go to the clinic morning and evening, and then in the afternoons and late nights, I used to sit and program in PHP. Of course, PHP at that time was almost unknown to everybody. So that is how we started.
Nice. And this variety of, like, things happening, it just like happened, life unfold some of the circumstances one by one, and then things kept changing, right?
Yeah, so life can be only predicted this much. Like otherwise, it is quite
Yeah.
uncertain, and you can only plan a very small segment of it and hope it goes that way. It sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's how it happened.
So, Dr. Sani, tell us more about SaniSoft. Like, you were into open source technology, right?
Yeah.
And basically trying to build things uh, in a technology that maybe people thought didn't exist, right? So, how were the initial days like in SaniSoft?
So, like we grew very organically. Like I said, it wasn't one fine day that I quit my medical practice and came into
Yeah.
SaniSoft. So I initially started coming of internet. I initially started working with Perl and Java. Java had just about come onto the horizon at that time, and I did not like any of those languages. So somebody said to me that this is a new thing which has come, PHP. You try that. There was this person named Rasmus Lerdoff. He had just joined Yahoo at that time, and he also was the co-creator of this thing, which was PHP. And I started that, and I immediately fell in love with PHP. So I started programming in PHP. I learned PHP from seeing the source code and from other people who were across the country and across the world trying to program in that language. But yes, it was difficult to find people who would know PHP, because like it was virtually unknown. Like any you asked anybody, they would be like, "What Perl? Why don't you do in Java?" Or worse, "Why don't you do in ASP or something like that?" So finding people was very tough. So we decided that when I needed my first employee, I decided that I will train the person myself. So I chalked out a training program which like became a de facto standard for SaniSoft, that anybody who would come to SaniSoft would learn PHP that way. And that's how we continued till almost very last.
And Dr. Sani, like when you founded SaniSoft, so at that time there was no startup culture, or startups are cool kind of thing, right? So what was India tech scene back then?
One, I was very clear that SaniSoft is not a startup, it is a small business. There
Okay,
is a very distinct difference between the two things. Like a startup has to rapidly scale up 10x, 20x, and founders typically exit. SaniSoft was a small business which we knew that we are going to grow organically. The tech scene at that time was quite open, especially with the Digit and PC Quest were these two magazines which were dominating the scene. And Bangalore had a lot of source conference and open source scene, and people were very willing to share things with us. Like I remember barely 1 year after we started SaniSoft, I was in Bangalore and I walked in to this book fair where, if you remember, there used to be a publisher called Rocks Press. They had those
okay,
big, thick books, red colored. And I asked them, "Do you have a
yeah.
book on PHP?" So they said, "PHP what?" I said, "PHP is the coolest language to program the web in." And their senior editor from UK was there. He was listening, and he said that, "Do you know PHP?" I said, "Yeah, I do program in PHP, and I've been doing this for past 1 year." He immediately said, "Will you write a book for me?" And that's how I was part of the team which wrote Professional PHP 4. It was several other people, but yes, at that time it did become a bestseller. So opportunities were plenty at that time.
And Dr. Sani, being part of open source movement for decades, how your experience has been?
Yeah, so for open source, we literally saw it grow from something which hobbies tinkered with to now it is literally that open source is the thing which runs the web. Like all the servers, all the cloud, the infrastructure is running on open source things, as you know. And I was there when Microsoft was trying to stifle the growth, to the point that Microsoft is now one of the biggest supporters of open source with GitHub and Herald Welt. Herald Welt, I've seen he's one of the kernel contributors of Linux, and I've seen that how he struggled with convincing Microsoft, and now he's the head of GitHub. So the tech scene at that time was very hackerish, and people who would do things for hobbies and would share and make it better, to now a more corporate culture. So I've seen the complete transformation. So we had Linux user groups, and I believe we met at one of those meetings when we used to run a PHP user group in Nagpur.
Okay. And Dr. Sani, what were the initial challenges that you faced in SaniSoft?
Uh, so SaniSoft was essentially, I was the CTO and my wife was the CEO. Both of us had no experience of running a business, and especially we did not understand accounting practices, we did not understand cash flow, we did not understand risk taking. So the initial challenges were how to do accounting, like what is double entry accounting, which is a standard. Then the CA taught us that, and then we discovered that GNU Cash has got double entry accounting. And thankfully, our CA, Dr. Tejendra Singh Rawal, who is a well-known person in Nagpur, he was very open source friendly. So till date, our accounts are kept on GNU Cash. So not knowing business, not having trained people, not understanding cash flows like in the beginning were big challenges to initially overcome. So we always ran the company like a middle class household. And there were times when suddenly we found that there is literally no money left in the bank, but we managed to tide over with interim loans from friends and family to pay the employees we had at that time. And it was at that time it was very small, like we barely had 5 people. But still, yes, it was the biggest shock came when we realized that after paying everybody, we'll have just 80 rupees left with us.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
so we were literally bankrupt. Thankfully, we got a client and we tied it over.
And then how did you, like, advance in building the team that could basically continue your vision?
Uh, like I said, we grew very organically. It was not anything sudden. We took very minimal risks. We were very clear that we want this business to sustain for a long time and be with us. So this was not a startup. This was a small business. So we grew our team also very organically, like from 5 people to 7 people and 10 and then 20 and 30 and so on. And we faced the challenges of how to find trained people because nobody knew PHP at that time. I am talking about the early 2000s. So I had a training module in PHP. We contacted some people whom again we met through user groups to train people for us using that modules. They were running computer classes. And the biggest challenges at that time was finding clients. So essentially open source marketing helped there initially. At that time you have to remember that there were no job sites like the freelancer sites which exist so much now, and they are all crowded, but there were none of those things existed at that time. So essentially the marketing was being on mailing lists, being in open source forums, contributing code, answering people, letting people know that we exist and we are available for hire. So that was the marketing. And also, a challenge was that since we were not business people, since we were not marketeers, we did not know how to shift this to a more traditional marketing channel. So, yes, we faced challenges there.
And how did you find out the balance? Like, most of the times companies struggle with प्रोजेक्ट है तो रिसोर्स नहीं है और रिसोर्स है तो प्रोजेक्ट नहीं है, राइट?
Uh, I was somewhat lucky because we trained people and we selected people very carefully. People stuck with me for very very long. Like people staying with me for 5 years to 7 years was the norm. And we picked up people right immediately out of the college, and we paid them around 20% more than what the freshers were getting, and they grew into the culture. We gave them opportunities like the open source only open source could provide. Like I remember that when Google Summer of Code started, that is the very first Google Summer of Code, and somebody from my office said that let us apply. I said we will not apply as students, we will apply as mentors. So in the very first Summer of Code, we had 4 mentors from SaniSoft, and we
Wow.
managed to get our project, which was called Coppermine Picture Gallery, into the very first Summer of Code. So that kind of opportunities were not available elsewhere, and the that market was also a wee bit more loyal at that time, I would say. Like this is again up till 2010, people would not drift so much.
Okay, and uh, there must be instances wherein the CTO and CEO might be having some difference of opinion and arguments हो गए. ऐसा कोई किस्सा आपको याद हो?
बहुत होता था, बहुत होता था, because when you are running a company with your spouse, and
Yeah,
also it was a home office kind of a setup. Like till very last, the ground floor was the main office, and the house was upstairs. So we had absolutely zero sense of boundaries when we began, because there was no office time, there was no difference between business communication and personal communication. It took us some hard lessons to realize that we are fighting about something personal versus we are fighting about something business related.
business. Yeah, yeah. Because then it carries over, right? You
It
know, the
carries
work
over.
never stops.
So thankfully, we could figure that out, because like we had a good belief in each other, and we said that no, we will go to office at 9 and come back at 6, and between 9 to 6 is the only time we will talk business. If business has to be talked, then we will talk in the areas designated as office. And whenever we would be angry with each other, one of us would question, are we fighting about business or are we fighting about a personal thing? And there, yes, there were times when we fought bitterly, not realizing that this was personal or this was business, wherein we
Business.
were mistaken that नहीं, ये तो पर्सनल है, तुम ध्यान नहीं दे रहे हो या तुम ध्यान नहीं दे रही हो. एंड देन वी रियलाइज कि तुम ध्यान नहीं दे रहे हो बिजनेस के पास, तो हम पर्सनल टाइम पे नहीं लड़ते हैं. So getting those boundaries in place, the correct word here is boundary between your work and your personal space, was very important for us. So
Acha, and
initially there were
uh,
lots of fights for based on that, and it took us some time to realize that we are fighting about work related things or personal related things.
and one more interesting aspect to this is vacations. So when your spouse is your partner, what would you do on vacation? Discuss business, or then how do you find?
Vacation. See, we also shared a lot of hobbies, me and my wife. Like, I was into wildlife and bird watching. She was also into that. So vacations were always initial. For some years, we did not take vacation because there was just not enough money or time for a vacation. Then our vacations were always very harsh, wildlife oriented vacations wherein we would go. So once you are on a safari, there is
Yeah,
no talking time. So it is literally morning सफारी लो, दोपहर में आके रेस्ट करो, शाम की सफारी लेंगे, फिर उसके बाद सो जाएंगे खाना खा के.
so jayenge,
So
right,
yeah,
right.
so vacations were very tough vacations. And then we graduated to cycling. That was also we took long distance cycling. That was also yeah. So on vacations, it was mostly, thankfully, always one, we took vacation when there were enough resources in office and enough money in the bank. So we were not worried about what will happen when we get back. Uh,
And one question, like from the two of you, who is the most more aggressive and demanding person?
I would say that I am, but if Swati hears that, she will say that she is. But yes, I'm the one who wants. I don't like change, so everything has to happen as per what I have planned or as per what I want. So actually, and that was the whole philosophy behind SaniSoft, that the coding standards were the ones which I have decided. So much so that I ultimately we had an integrated system that the code will not check in unless it passes my standards. So we were the first ones to adopt version control in the country, not just the city. So we used to work with concurrent version system, not just SVN, subversion. So CVS was the first version control system, then came SVN, and then finally everybody graduated to Git. So, and integrated testing, test driven development, all those things were primarily aimed because I was very aggressive with standardization of things. So I would say that I am very aggressive at that point.
Okay, and then SaniSoft started to scale, right? So, what were the challenges in scaling the organization?
See, actually, it all the maximum size it grew to where, total we were 35 ish,
Yeah.
and that is not really scale. It was still a flat organization. That I was the CTO, I had managers, and I we were planning to like split SaniSoft into four different divisions and or if needed companies. But essentially till the very last we did not really scale. I just overworked myself.
Okay.
And
Okay.
scaling or training a second rung in a small business gets very difficult because you need to have a lot of buffer for that
Yeah.
in terms of resources, and you also have to remember that the second rung whom you are trying to train, they will have their own life dreams and uh, aims. So, well, my first effort at training the second rung failed miserably. They all trained themselves, got a good salary, and then they moved on to bigger companies. Most of them are in FANG companies and like that. So, scaling has always been tough, and scaling is always a challenge for a small business because you are not big enough to allow for buffers or allow for trainers, and you're always the constraint is always having resources.
Okay. Okay. And then, Dr. Sani, moving from tech to CBT was a huge pivot. How did that happen?
uh, See, again, organic growth and having need to know basis things like when SaniSoft was at its peak, like this is like 2008 to 2012, and we were doing really well. I was involved very minimally in the running of the company. I, for no reason, came down with clinical depression. And I did not even realize that I had depression because there was no reason. Like everything was going absolutely perfect. And just that I wouldn't get out of the bed. And people said that, okay, now you're big enough, rich enough, you don't need to work, you can stay in bed till 1 o'clock. And then I started skipping my meals, and then I realized that no, something is wrong with me, and I kind of self-diagnosed myself with depression, and I did not want to take any medicines, so I landed up with a CBT therapist because the web said that CBT is the thing for depression. And yes, it was a mild clinical depression, and but then like so many other things, unless I have tested the thing, I wouldn't believe in it. So I was arrogant enough to say that CBT will not work for me. So I started reading about CBT. Then I started to train myself in CBT. I went ahead and took a certification in CBT. And when I was formally training for CBT, I realized, and people around me realized, that I was a good therapist. I was very empathic, and being of a logical bend of mind, CBT did prove that yes, I could do it very well. And I had wanted to pivot for a long time because, like, essentially. Even after I cured myself of my own depression, I did need something to do. So I started doing cognitive behavioral therapy for the CXOs of Fortune 500 companies. And I therein I learned digital marketing formally from a coach who taught me how to get clients, the so-called high paying clients over LinkedIn. And that was the first really marketing aha for me, that wow, this works. And yeah, so and then I got into a group called Ecology. It is a Scotland based group which trains uh, people to be coaches and mental health helpers, so to say. And I was associated with Ecology for almost 5 years. And Ecology platform is still there, but I am no longer associated with that.
And Dr. Sani, can you simplify CBT for our viewers, like for a layman?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, the biggest thing that uh, okay, one line. What the way you react or the way you think is dependent on what you believe about a thing. So, cognitive behavior therapy is essentially a talk therapy, and whatever happens to you, they say that the activating event in which we call as the A is not directly dependent, responsible for how you react to it. Like if somebody swears at you and you get angry, this doesn't have a direct reaction. So the activating event is A, somebody swearing at you, and the consequence C is that you get angry. Most people would think that I am getting angry because the person is swearing at me. No, it is a belief that you have that person X should not swear at me, that makes you angry. And this belief is what is targeted by CBT. If I start to believe like, okay, fine, person X must be having a bad day, so he is swearing at me. It doesn't. It is his problem, not my problem. I may not get angry. Of course, this is way simplified, but
Yeah.
yeah, that essentially is the crux of CBT. That A is not responsible. The activating event is not responsible for the consequence that you are having. It is the belief you have about A that is responsible for your reaction.
So just to simplify more, it's a kind of talk therapy. You
Yeah,
talk
it's a
it
talk
out,
therapy.
and then
Yeah, you
basically.
you talk and you target the beliefs that a person has about what is happening to them.
So if you target the beliefs of a person while you're doing the therapy, they might get triggered again, right? Because because now that belief is about to be broken or maybe
Yes,
questioned.
and that is the whole point, right? Because like if you challenge the belief, and that is where your skill as a therapist comes in, that you have to gain the trust of a person absolutely before you start it. And that is why CBT is one of the most formalized form of therapies, that there is always a script which is running underneath the any session of CBT. A good CBT therapist, the client feels that you are just having a conversation, but no, the session always follows a 16-point agenda that you go through, and that is why it gets results.
So any examples of a therapy session with any of your clients that was really interesting?
Well, I can't really give any great details because it is covered under
Yeah.
confidentiality. But essentially, within 3 sessions, usually there is what you call an aha moment, because CBT is at times experiential, but it is also a lot more didactic, that you teach the person. So once this ABC model, I usually used to have a slide or a whiteboard, and I would illustrate the CBT model with their the ABC model of CBT with their particular event, that what happened, that why you fought with your wife,
Yeah.
and something as simple as that, had instead of your wife, if this was a colleague in office, would you still have spoken this way? And therein lies the aha moment, that no, but then how can I speak to my colleague in that manner? Why do you think that you can speak with your wife in this manner but you can't speak with your colleague in this manner? What is different? That is what is making you behave differently. That is your
Right.
belief.
Right. That is the belief that,
That
like,
is the belief, that no, I
yeah,
cannot shout at my colleague in
colleague.
office,
Yeah.
because that will be bad manners. But wife, I have the liberty to shout because she's my wife. No, but then why? Many people don't have a reason for that. It is an ingrained conditioning. And
Yeah.
that is the belief that you know you can't shout at your wife either. And even if you can, does it give you good results? No, it doesn't. What if you spoke like you spoke to your colleague, explaining to that person that why she was wrong? Work with your wife. So that is the belief which is targeted in CBT.
And what would be your advice, Dr. Sani, to entrepreneurs, like the CBT advice to entrepreneurs? Because, they live in a high stress environment, as I say, as I understand, because there's a lot of pressure. They have to run their own business, then there's family, then there's health they need to take care of. A lot of things are going on. And sometimes it's an emotional turmoil, right? They go through.
Yeah, that is yeah, one. The best advice was actually given by our 15-year old son. Now my son is 26. He said to us that you have become too attached to your business. Your business is your business, it is not your family. Have that boundary. So again, for entrepreneurs, I would say have a boundary. You can change your business. Mostly, you won't be able to change your family.
And work life balance or work life choices.
Work-life balance.
And why
Uh,
is that so?
Work-life balance, because again, if you're an entrepreneur, there will be times when you will have to have more stretchable boundaries. So, and then you have to have people around you who understand that part. And yes, you should have the understanding and maturity to pull back that much as well when time allows.
Let's take one example. I have got a very big deal that is going to earn me a lot of profit. At the same time, family is expecting me to be with them somewhere, which might cause this deal. I will lose the deal, right? So now I have to make a choice.
Again, you can have both. You can literally have both, especially given the technology. You can have both at this point. And yes, there has to be an understanding between you and your partner, that whatever you are doing, I was very lucky in that sense that both of us, we were working in the same thing. So like whatever you are doing it for them. And yes, at times you have to question yourself, that are you doing it for the sake of the business itself, or you are doing it for something greater than the business.
Nice. That is a beautiful insight, Dr. Sani. Thank you so much. Uh, you teach global students and Indian students as well, right?
Yeah.
So, two very different audiences. How's your experience?
Uh, See, CBT is a very, it is like it is ABC. You can't change much. What changes is the context. So the analogy which I use in terms of Indian context is different. Of course, you have to understand the nuances of an Indian household as well. Like a child or a son in Indian context may not be able to go very much against the father's wishes, whereas outside they can just step out and put in very firm boundaries. So that is the only difference, really. But as far as CBT goes, as far as choosing work life balance goes, it is virtually an human condition and universal.
Nice. And what do you enjoy most about teaching?
See, again, I've been involved with open source and sharing of knowledge since very long now. So teaching is a part of sharing my knowledge. And I was particularly impressed early on in my career that people far more intelligent than me, far more intellectually superior than me, were willing to share their knowledge and were happy to do that. And then I saw that how their work grew because they were sharing. And sharing is the only true legacy that you can leave behind. It may not carry
Okay,
your
yeah.
name, but that knowledge will go on.
Yeah, and then that knowledge will grow basically
And
in
that
the
knowledge will grow. And knowledge can only grow if you let it be free and share.
share.
So, teaching for me is a part of that.
Nice, nice. And Dr. Sani, in your view, what is the one misconception people have about learning?
Uh, we are kind of conditioned that after a certain age, you can't pivot or you can't learn
Yeah.
new things. So, that is totally wrong. Like last year, I went in and learned embedded systems, and I had never programmed in C++ before this. So I just picked it up and I learned that. The second big misconception is that after a certain age, you won't be able to do physical things. Yes, physical limitations do come, but I ran my first marathon at the age of 51. So, and till about late 30s, I had never stepped into any kind of a gym, and I was a very thin, sickly kind of a person. So these are the two misconceptions, that you have limits to your doing things, which people place it very narrowly. It is those limits are not as narrow as you imagine it to be. Yes, there are limits, yes, practical limits, but they are usually not as narrow as most people imagine it to be.
So Dr. Sani, you ran a marathon. उसमें क्या हुआ था?
See, before I ran a marathon, I became a super randonnier. A super randonnier is a person who has cycled in four events, that is a 200 kilometer, 300 kilometer, 400 kilometers, and a 600 kilometer cycling event. So I won't go into the details, but 600 kilometers you have to complete in 40 hours. So I completed that. The 600 kilometers we did from Nagpur, Raipur, and back. I did it in 36 hours. And yes, in that I did injure my knee. So because I had injured my knee, and it was physiotherapy was a part of recovering my knee, I started running from cycling. And then I said, okay, why just run? Let's try running a marathon. So I did run one marathon, And then I decided that no, I no longer like the endurance sports. And these days I'm just running around 5 kilometers.
So, this was Dr. Sani's story. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please do subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. I'll see you next week with another interesting story.